بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We're starting a new session on Quran analysis, and we've been doing Surah Al-Hadid. Inshallah, today we'll be looking at the explanation of hopefully ayah number 18 to, if we manage, maybe 21. We'll see how much we can be able to cover, inshallah. 18 to 20, that will be good, or 18 to 21, inshallah. All right, so maybe just a recap from what we did before. So the last explanation we did was ayah number 15 to ayah number 16 to 17. And that was the part, Allah mentions in the Quran, but بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ألم يأن للذين آمنوا أن تخشع قلوبهم لذكر الله وما نزل من الحق ولا يكونوا كالذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبل فطال عليهم الأمد فقست قلوبهم وكثير منهم فاسقون اعلموا أن الله يحيي الأرض بعد موتها قد بينا لكم الآيات لعلكم تعقلون. So this is the part where we talked about, isn't it time for believers that their hearts have khushu'? And again, we discussed the meanings of khushu'. We went into deep details what khushu' means: to humble yourself, to lower yourself from a high position to a low position. That's the idea of khushu', to make yourself receptible for the dhikr of Allah and the remembrance of Allah and the Quran, and to make yourself receptible. That's the idea. So when Allah says or poses this question, this really remarkable question, أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, isn't it time for the hearts of the believers to be receptible to the message, to the remembrance of Allah and the Quran? وَمَا نَزَلَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ. And we also talked about مِنَ الْحَقِّ, but that it had the dual meanings of min al-haq. It could either mean, from Allah, because one of the names of Allah is al-haq, or al-haq could just mean truth, which means that min al-haq means from the truth, something from the truth. Isn't it time that the believers' hearts become receptible, become humble to the remembrance of Allah and whatever has come to them from the truth, anything from the truth? Isn't it time for the believers' hearts to become? وَلَا يَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ. And we also talked about أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ and the different names. Well, not all of them, but the difference between أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ and أَتَيْنَاهُمُ الْكِتَابَ. So there are two kind of distinctions between the people of the book. So you have أهل الكتاب as a general term, and then الذين آتيناهم الكتاب, those whom we have given the book, and Allah attaches Himself to these people, and therefore these people are praiseworthy. These are the people that Allah associates Himself with, and they're praiseworthy. But as opposed to الذين أوتوا الكتاب, they were given the book. Allah distances Himself from them because these are people who are humiliated in the Quran, and these are people who went away from the message of um, Allah. فطال عليهم الأمد فقست قلوبهم, and therefore their hearts became hard. And we talked about qasawa and qaswa and how their hearts became hard. وكثير منهم فاسقون, and most of them, كثير منهم فاسقون, they are فاسقون, they're rebellious, they're corrupt, they are immoral. And we discussed more about this idea of fasiqun. Again, here it's such an interesting example that Allah gives us, that among all these believers of the people that we gave them the book, only a few of them were worthy of mention, but most of them, كثير منهم فاسقون, most of them did not. Um, most of them became corrupted. And then we also discussed this beautiful example that is mentioned in this passage. اعلموا أن الله يحيي الأرض بعد موتها. You had better know that Allah brings life to a dead heart, to a dead earth. And just how it alludes both to spiritual resurrection, that is the Imani resurrection. Allah brings life to a dead heart, just like He brings life to a dead earth. And that whole idea, that whole symbolism of the earth becoming alive with life, it reminds us of not only our spiritual resurrection, how our Iman can be resuscitated, but also it reminds us of the Day of Judgment, how our bodies will be resurrected. So in just this one example, Allah captures both dimensions of resurrection. Both our spiritual resurrection and our physical resurrection on the day of judgment. So whoever is denying or is thinking that how will I be resurrected when I'm dust, when I've decomposed and been forgotten and I'm nothing, puts forth a very simple example. I mean, just look at the earth. One minute it's dry and barren and khasha and dead, and it doesn't have any life. The next minute, rain falls on it, and what do you see? You see green everywhere. That is just how it's going to happen. One minute you're dead and you're dust and you're dry and you're nothing and you're not there. The next minute on the day of judgment, you're everything like a plant. Subhanallah. So inshallah today we're going to start looking at المصدقين والمصدقات قرضوا الله قرضا حسنا يضاعف لهم ولهم أجر كريم. Certainly the مصدقين, and we'll discuss this word مصدقين in detail. So the مصدقين of from the men and the مصدقات of the women, وأقرضوا الله قرضا حسنا, and they gave Allah or they loaned Allah a goodly loan. Again, this term has come before, and so we're going to go into details as what that means. What will Allah do? يضاعف له ولهم أجر كريم. Allah will multiply for them and they have a noble reward. Again, Ajrun Kareem has come before. So this, when you hear these things that have been mentioned before, it kind of like just makes you wonder, why is it being mentioned again? What is the connection? What is the relationship? And inshallah, we'll try to expound on all those as much as we can. Some of those relationships that we can be able to do. Okay. So let me start here my presentation and then we can begin. Okay. So we had done this part, you had better know, we had done that. And then we talked about the process of life coming into a dead earth, reminds us of farming and what the implications of that. And we also talked about لعلكم تعقلون. Perhaps now you will deeply understand. And the idea of aql, what it means like a fortress to control yourself, to hold yourself back. And so this kind of knowledge would make you be protected from it. It will be like a fortress for you from ignorance, and it will help you control yourself from being ignorant and doing the wrong things. لعلكم تعقلون, so that perhaps you may deeply understand. Now we're going to start from the next portion here. And that is إن المصدقين والمصدقات. So after we talked about all that and the disease and the weakness of the heart and how Allah can bring the heart back to life from the precipice of death. The heart was dead, the iman was gone, and then Allah brought it back to life. So Allah mentioned the problem. This was the diagnosis. What is the disease? What is the disease? It's weak iman, almost dead iman. That is the problem. So Allah mentioned sort of like this is the problem that you have. Okay, again, remember that this section is again about iman and spending, but it's going to be slightly different from section 2, which is also about iman and spending, in that this section is it focuses on a specific aspects of iman and specific aspects of spending. In section 2, it was more general iman and general spending. It was just very general. And now here, Allah is honing it down and He's looking at a specific aspect of Iman. And the specific aspect here is weak or dead Iman. So that has been mentioned. You had better know that Allah can revive your dead heart. That is the prognosis. That is what we're dealing with. And now Allah doesn't just leave us there. It's like, okay, so now you have weak Iman. That's the end of it. أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ. Isn't it time for believers' hearts to have Iman and to have khushu' to the remembrance of Allah? And then He leaves us. Like, okay, I'm not going to tell you how to go about it. No, He says, here's the solution. إِنَّ الْمُصَّدِّقِينَ وَالْمُصَّدِّقَاتِ وَأَقْرَضُوا اللَّهَ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا يُضَاعَفُ لَهُمْ وَلَهُمْ أَجْرٌ كَرِيمٌ. So initially, first of all, he told us how to get to khushu'. Khushu', remembrance of Allah and the Quran. That's gonna, It's going to make you humble. And the more khushu' you have, the more iman you have. We talked about this last time. He's giving here another solution. Sadaqah. Specifically, sadaqah. Specifically, a form of spending that is materialistic. It's not spending your energy, it's not spending your time, it's not spending your talent, it's not spending all these other things that we mentioned before. No, now here it's very specific. It's charity, sadaqah, what we actually know as sadaqah. So here's the solution for those hearts that are infected or that are facing weaknesses, those hearts that need khushu', those hearts that need preparation like that land, those hearts that need the purification. What is that? Spending, charity, sadaqah. Because certainly those who spend, both women and men, just like Allah says, and loaned Allah a goodly loan, what will Allah do for them? Allah will multiply for them. That's one. And two, He will give them a noble reward, twice the reward, not just multiply them. SubhanAllah, can you sit and imagine that for a second? Allah will multiply you. By how much? He doesn't say. He doesn't say by how much. He's just going to multiply for you. And then that's not it. That's not the end of it. وَلَهُمْ أَجْرٌ كَرِيمٌ, and they will have a noble reward. Noble reward. This is quality. So يُضَاعَفُ, that's quantity. And then أَجْرٌ كَرِيم, that's quality. So you're going to have a quantity, and it's both quantity and quality. This reward is not just one-sided. It's everything you ever imagined. It's a lot, and it's the best quality you can ever imagine, right? Or you can't even imagine, because this is beyond our imagination, right? And by the way, this word, it was mentioned before. It was mentioned, this idea of loaning Allah a goodly loan was mentioned before. Allah said, "Man ذا الذي يقرض الله قرضا حسنا?" Who is it? Is there anyone out there that will give Allah, that will loan Allah a goodly loan? So it was in the form of like a question. But here you see, it's not a question, right? This is إِنَّ الْمُصَدِّقِينَ وَالْمُصَدِّقَاتِ. Certainly the believers among the men and the women, they will and those who loan Allah a goodly loan. Before it was man الذي, it was a question. Here it's not a question anymore. It's a fact. It's as if these special people that Allah asked a question. Is there anyone out there that would do this? And then you have some special people that actually stepped up. They stepped forward and they did it. They gave Allah a goodly loan. They stepped forward and they actually did it. And then Allah reports about them and said, Innal musaddiqina wal musaddiqat. These people that actually stepped forward, when I asked, is there anyone out there, man alladhi yuqridu Allah qardan hasana? And you had these people that stepped up and did it, Allah will multiply for them. And not only multiply for them in quantity, but also give them quality. وَلَهُمْ أَجْرٌ Kareem, subhanallah. Just look at how the flow of events. Because this section, by the way, مَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يُقْرِضُ اللَّهَ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا, remember, it was mentioned where? It was mentioned before the Day of Judgment. Right? So you had section 1 about Allah, section 2, Iman and spending, where this question was mentioned. Is there anyone out there who's going to give Allah a goodly loan? Then we went into the section of the Day of Judgment, where Allah took us to the future and we saw the repercussions of not having Iman, and we saw what the munafiqun will be dealing with. And then Allah brought us back, and now it's like after seeing that scene, we took up the responsibility. Now, innal musaddiqina wal musaddiqat, just how the Quran flows. I mean, and to imagine that this book was a qira'ah, it was revealed as a recitation, it was never written down, it was never edited, it did not go through any proofreading, through any addition, through any subtraction, through any, when you write something, you make mistakes and you remove this and you add this and you, wallahi, none of that. And to just look at the structure, how everything flows together so beautifully, and it just came out as words perfectly like this. This has to be the speech of Allah. When you see things like this, it puts iman, it increases your iman, and you know for a fact that this is the word of Allah. Subhanallah. Anyway, so it is as if the first question, when Allah says, Man الذي يقرض الله قرضا حسنا, when Allah asked this question, it was like an invitation. Allah was inviting us. Is anyone going to take up this noble task? And then the second one, إن المصدقين والمصدقات وأقرضوا الله قرضا حسنا. This part, it was like an affirmation of their response. Allah is affirming that they actually took up this responsibility, or they responded to Allah's invitation. So the first was a question calling out to anyone who can step up. The second one is a declaration that they in fact stepped up. Subhanallah. Just how it flows, this is beautiful. Just and in the same way, just like the earth, once it comes to life, it multiplies with life. When you look at a dead earth, it looks barren, it looks empty, it looks dead, it looks like there's nothing. And then when the rain comes and you see vegetation everywhere, it's green everywhere, and it gives you hope. There's so much multiplication. In that same way that the earth multiplies in goodness and in khair, Allah will multiply for these people. Subhanallah. These extremely charitable people will have multiplied rewards as a result of their generosity, just like the earth, once it's brought back to life, it just multiplies with life. Subhanallah. So Allah multiplies for them. The other thing that we need to look at here, Allah uses the word musaddiqeen. So there are two readings of this word. There's one with a shadda on the sad, so the one that we are familiar with, musaddiqeen. If you look at our masahif, most of the masahif that we're using would have this. Innal musaddiqina wal musaddiqat. Okay? But there's also another qira'ah, there's also another form of recitation or reading without the shadda. So musaddiqeen. Okay? And what's the repercussion of this? What we have is that it means that it can either be from family 5, which is the one we have, or it can be from family 2. Okay, so it can either be from fa'ala, family 2, fa'ala yufa'ilu, or it can be from tafa'ala yatafa'alu. So when there's a shadda, then this is from family 5. And I think we discussed a little bit about this when we did the Nahw and Sarf, how it all merges together. So it was mutasaddiq. So mutasaddiq became musaddiq. And why that merging happens? Because of intensity, because of extreme nature of their tasadduq. They're very extremely charitable. It's not just being charitable. No, it's extreme charitability. So يعني Allah is even praising by just using this word تصدق in a merged form, in an idgham form, مصدق, not متصدق, but مصدق. It tells us about how much they spend. And of course, the Mufassirun have talked about this, and they've said this is not just the fara'id, spending on the fara'id, because the fara'id everyone is expected to do. Like, for example, zakah, everybody who is eligible for zakah has to do it. Or, for example, there's other forms of payment, fidya and whatnot. These are mandatory payments. So this is not counted from this part. They see that this part is about involuntary charity. So these people go up above and beyond, and they do it extremely. Like every opportunity they get to do charity, they do it. Okay? So this is what we call ibdal. So where is-saddaqa is used instead of tasaddaqa. So is-saddaqa yasaddaqu, tasadduq is used instead of tasaddaqa yatasaddaqu. And we've explained that this shows exaggeration and intensity in their actions. All right. So, and again, of course, we talked about the relationship between iman and spending when we were talking about section 2. Iman is inward. Nobody can see your iman. Nobody can say you're a mu'min or not a mu'min. Nobody can do that. Only Allah knows what is in the heart. The iman is in the heart. But spending is something that is outward. It's something that can be seen. It's something that is physical. So the inward affects how you behave outward. And this is very important in the discussion, or especially in this period of Medina, because the Sahaba, first of all, they've gone through Badr and Uhud. They've gone through a very challenging times, and money is such a challenge. Wealth is a problem. The economy is very difficult at this point. So only that iman inside of you would actually push you to spend at such a time. At such a time when everybody is like, I really can't give because, it's very difficult. But that's the time that iman would actually show up, and that's the time where the munafiqun would actually be seen because the munafiqun would not give, you know. And of course, we learn also from the seerah that at some point, the Muslims were commanded that if they want to see the Prophet ﷺ, they should come with charity. They should come with some money. And this was very difficult for the Munafiqun. They were like, what? I'd rather not go. Because for them, it's not about Iman. So the test of Iman is actually how much charitable you are. So here we see a relationship between Iman, which is the inward belief, and spending, charity, which is the outward. And charity is also just one form of spending, by the way. But here Allah emphasizes on charity. So charity as an outward manifestation of Iman. In other words, if the heart is thriving with the life of Iman, then the limbs automatically will be vigorous in the giving of sadaqah, especially. You can't just walk by a person and see how much they're suffering and you have a little bit extra and just walk by. You can't. You have to give because there's something inside you. There's an Iman. There's something that is pushing you towards doing good. Now, the second reading without the shadda, it is from family too, like we mentioned. And this has the meaning of tasdeeq. What is tasdeeq? Tasdeeq is actually to affirm faith. It's actually iman. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh is called as-siddiq. Why? Because he was the foremost in iman, in affirming the truth. Every time the Prophet said this, he said he was the first one to believe, he was the first one to accept. So this idea of affirming the truth and immediately believing, so that is tasdeeq. So if we take up this meaning, again, it goes back to the idea of iman, implying that those who affirm the reality of iman in their hearts, both men and women, and then proceed to heed the call to Allah, to give Allah a goodly loan, they will have double the reward as promised. So both, it could either mean iman and spending. It could either mean iman, tasdeeq, or it could mean spending, charity, tasadduq. But because we're in this topic is about iman and spending, I believe that both meanings apply. Because again, section 2 was about iman and spending. This section is also about iman and spending. And by Allah using this particular word, perhaps He's trying to capture both meanings of iman and spending in one word, tasadduq. Is saddaqa yasaddaqu. SubhanAllah, what a beautiful way of capturing that. Okay. So, however, I am more convinced that perhaps both iman and in fact have been specified. In other words, a dying iman coming back to life and specifically giving in charity in particular. So not spending in general, like we mentioned, specifically iman. And we've discussed a little bit about this. So why is this the case? Why is it like what's the relationship here between iman and infaq, and why is it mentioned here? I don't know, but just a random guess here. But perhaps, after painting this ghastly image of the hypocrites on the day of judgment, it is important to address the specific issue here. The specific issue that leads to hypocrisy in these particular times of economic strife in Medina, like we mentioned. So dead iman, which leads to stinginess, and we're going to see this later on, is going to be mentioned, because again, iman is inward, spending is outward. So if there's no iman inside, there's not going to be spending outside, or somebody's going to feel like they want to hold on because of that. So these ayat are addressing the issues of the hypocrites dead on. After mentioning the distinction on the day of judgment between the believers and the hypocrites, Allah is addressing the issue. The issue here is that your iman is dead, and therefore you're stingy, you're not spending. So you can see how that relationship comes about. Now let's talk a little bit about more on qard hasana. Man الذي يقرض الله قرضا حسنا. All right? Or in this particular case, وأقرض الله قرضا حسنا. Right? So first of all, this qard is family one master. All right? Family one. So qarada, qardan. All right? But the verb that is used is aqrada. وأقرضوا أقرض يقرض, which is family four. So you have a family four verb and a masdar from family one. What is the significance here? This is the word of مفعول مطلق. مفعول مطلق when you have a masdar from the same verb. So for example, like I keep saying so many times, ضرب ضربا. ضرب ضربا. Both family one. Okay, the meaning is the same. But what happens when you change the mustard from a different family like we have here? So they both mean the same thing. Qard is still a loan. Iqrab, which would be the mustard that we expected to be used here, since it's a maf'ul mutlaq, it also means loan. So both of them mean loan. There's no big deal there. But what is the significance of using the family one? The thing about family one, masdar qardan, actually has two meanings. It's not just one meaning as iqrad. Iqrad has only one meaning, loan. But qardan has two meanings. One meaning is the loan itself, the money itself. So for example, if I say I'm giving you sadaqah, sadaqah is the money itself. It's not the idea of charity, it's not the idea of spending. But qard also has the meaning of masdar, which is the idea of spending, which is the idea of giving a loan, right? So loaning and the loan itself are both captured in qardan, right? So that's a beauty of using this. So by Allah mentioning this and not using the family four, which would be limited, Allah is both referring to the money itself and is also referring to the act of giving. In other words, by combining these two families, both meanings are merged in a summarized discussion, right? So you have both the money being referred to and the act of loaning. The loan is good and the act of doing it is also good. And again, how do we know that it is good? Because Allah says, قَرْضًا حَسَنًا. It's not just qard, it's not just some loan. It's قَرْضًا حَسَنًا. So the hasanan is added here because it describes the act of giving, the act of loaning, and it also describes the purity of the mal. It's attained from halal means. It's the way it's given in a beautiful way. You know, when sometimes somebody gives charity or does a good thing and then they do it for the sake of showing off, or they keep reminding you, or they do it half-heartedly, or they do it because somebody else wanted them to do it and they didn't really want to do it, you know. This is not it. Qardan hasana means the way you even give it. Just like Aisha, before she gave out some coins, what would she do? She would perfume them. The way she gave it. Subhanallah. And not just how much she gave it, but the way she gave it. So the money itself, and as well as the way she did it. This would be qardan hasanan. Right? So it both refers to what the money itself and also how it is given. Okay. And also, of course, this points to the purity of intention and sincerity of actions by the people. And that's why they get rewards that are doubled, that are multiplied. And at the same time, lahum ajrun kareem. They get a noble reward because of the intention and the purity of their actions. And then Allah says, قد بينا لكم الآيات لعلكم تعقلون. This was mentioned before, so that perhaps you can understand the relationship. Now, I just, read this hadith, which was very interesting, which shows the relationship between charity and extinguishing sins and sins, how they're both related. And again, when we in the section of the day of judgment, the believers, they told the munafiqun some things, what they did. They told them, fatantum anfusakum, you put yourself in trials, and instead of repenting and going back to Allah and purifying yourselves from the sins that you have done after you have put yourself in trial, tarabbastum, you waited and you just sat there pretty. And you didn't do anything about it. You waited for the environment to change instead of changing yourselves. وَتَرَبَّسْتُمْ وَارْتَبْتُمْ. And as a result of not changing, you started to have doubts. وَارْتَبْتُمْ وَغَرَّتْكُمُ الْأَمَانِي. And because of these doubts, you had to lie to yourself. You had to start wishful thinking. You had to now jump from this wish to that wish to this wish, and you started lying to yourself. وَغَرَّكُمْ بِاللَّهِ وَغَرَّكُمْ بِاللَّهِ الْغَرُورُ. And Shaitan, the chief deceiver, was there to deceive you. So this is what happened. In other words, when they did fitna to themselves, when they put themselves in fitna, they didn't step back and they didn't uh, ask for forgiveness. They didn't ask Allah for istighfar. And now here we see a relationship between charity and sins and how charity extinguishes sin. The Prophet ﷺ mentions in a hadith, and maybe I can share this hadith for you guys in case I can put it in the chat here for anybody who wants to read it later. So the Prophet ﷺ tells us, shall I not tell you of the means of goodness? Fasting is a shield, and charity extinguishes sin as water extinguishes fire. And a man's prayer in the middle of the night also does the same. So um, we learn here that charity extinguishes sins. If these people who put themselves in fitna, if they had just gone back and instead of doing tarabbus, instead of just waiting, they did a bit of charity. This charity would have extinguished their sins, would have wiped out their sins, would have purified them. And perhaps that purification would have boosted their iman, would have done something to their iman. In other words, we're learning a cycle here. None of us is perfect. All of us are going to commit sins. All of us are going to put ourselves in fitna at some point. All of us are going to experience a certain situation, but we must stop it at the first point. We must cut it off at the first point. Immediately we do sins, what do? Istighfar. Or immediately we do sins, we follow it up with a good deed like charity. You know, and this is from the sunnah, from our tradition, that when we commit a sin, we follow it up with a good thing. When you do something bad, you follow it up with a good thing. That's the sunnah. That's what it's all about. None of us is going to be perfect. There's nobody who lives a perfect life. All of us, we sin. All of us, we do something that is not required of us. But the idea is once you've done it, go back. Do something, change. Do not do tarabbus. Do not sit in that situation and expect the situation to change itself. You must change. You must be the one to do the change, right? So we talked about that um, before. All right. So, and that's the relationship between charity. So don't be like those whose hearts hardened as a result of time passing on them and them not taking action. We learned about this. الذين أوتوا الكتاب فطال عليهم الأمد فقست قلوبهم. They did nothing. So a lot of time passed by them until their hearts became hard. You don't want to be like those people. So get up. If there's something you've done, follow it up with charity. Give charity today. It doesn't matter how small. Again, what did we talk about? قرضا حسنا. It's not about the quantity. It's about what you give and how you give it. That's what matters. That's what حسنا means in وأقرضوا الله قرضا حسنا. And of course, don't belittle anything that you do. You may think it's small, but in Allah's eyes, it is mighty. When Allah says يُضَاعَفُ لَهُمْ, Allah will multiply it for you and it will become massive. And you'll be like, that charity I gave, that 200 shillings, that 100 shillings, that 50 shillings, that 20 shillings I gave, this huge mountain is as a result of that. Subhanallah. Allah will multiply it until you won't even be able to understand the mathematics here of Allah's multiplication. We cannot understand. We cannot fathom that. Subhanallah. There's something here subtle that is being mentioned. You have a verb, أقرض, that is معطوف to a noun, المصدقين والمصدقات. Now pause here. If you've taken my grammar classes and we've done حروف العطف, you know that when we're doing عطف, when we're doing connections, we connect an ism to an ism and a verb to a verb. It's very logical. Just like I say, I ate a banana and an apple. I ate a banana and an apple. A banana and an apple. Both isms. Good. But I can't say I ate a banana and sleep. You can't eat sleep. You can't eat a verb. Do you understand? Like that adverb is it's not logical in English or in Arabic. So when things like this happen, there has to be something else. There has to be some juicy balagha things that are happening. So what is going on here? One, it can be understood that the al in al-musaddiqin, so that al is in the meaning of ism mawsul alladhi. So if I say, for example, so the idea is إن الذين صدقوا إن الذين صدقوا من الرجال والنساء. Okay, إن الذين صدقوا وأقرضوا. So when you say it like that, then it becomes it flows nicely because we have a verb and a verb. إن الذين صدقوا وأقرضوا الله قرضا حسنا. Just like we can understand when I say al-Muslim. When I say al-Muslim and I want to put this in a jumla fi'aliyah, I would say الذي أسلم. الذي أسلم. المسلم هو الذي أسلم. A Muslim is the one who became يعني أسلم, right? So I can take any word that has al on it and I can define it using الذي. So in this way, اسم موصول behaves similar to al, okay? Except al enters into noun and ism mawsul enters into sentences like we've just seen. So in that sense, then, the verb aqradu is not ma'atuf directly to the ism. It is ma'atuf to another verb that is mentioned by alladhi. But if you put alladhi there, then it changes this to a jumla fi'liyah. And then it removes the meaning of an ism. And we know the meaning of an ism is permanent, is fixed. So by Allah using the ism, He's trying to say that these people, in al-musaddiqina wal-musaddiqat, they are permanently extremely charitable. It's not just a one-time thing. By the fact that He used is saddaqu, this verb, musaddiq, means that they're extremely charitable. That's one. And number two, by using the ism, it means that they're permanent in this attribute, that this attribute is in them. It's a permanent thing. It's not just a one-time off that they do it one time, they give a lot of charity and that was it. No, it's constantly, it's all the time. So you see how the importance of learning nahu and the importance of learning sarf and the importance of learning balagha and how it all just came together in this one particular sentence, إن المصدقين والمصدقات وأقرضوا الله قرضا حسنا. Right? Anyway. Right, so we've talked about the difference between a noun and a verb. Now, according to Ibn Ashur, this is a type of spending that necessitates everything good, from giving willingly and cheerfully with a smile, not having any expectations from the one you're giving to, yani solely for the sake of Allah. The intention is absolutely pure. In short, a perfect spending. Now, a person could be extremely charitable, giving all the time, that they become branded as a philanthropist. Somebody who always gives, they might be called a philanthropist. But does that guarantee that this is qard hasan? No. It is not possible to be a muqrid in this case. Allah could have used muqrid, could have used instead of sorry. So the idea is a person can be extremely charitable, but they're not necessarily, it's not necessarily a qard hasan. But it is possible that a person is mutasaddiq, musaddiq, and even an extreme version of it, musaddiq, like in this ayah. Allahu ta'ala alam. Okay? So it is possible. It is possible that a person can give extremely, can become mutasaddiq, right? Okay. I'm gonna go to the next slide here. So we're going to start at number 19. Allah says, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الصِّدِّيقُونَ والشهداء عند ربهم لهم أجرهم ونورهم والذين كفروا وكذبوا بآياتنا أولئك أصحاب الجحيم. And those who believe in Allah and His messengers, again plural, وَرُسُلِهِ أولئك هم الصديقون. They are in fact as-siddiqun, and we've talked about this. صديقون. صديقون is a different word, sorry. والشهداء And martyrs عند ربهم, so there's two ways of which you look at this shuhada, and we will discuss about that. عند ربهم لهم أجرهم ونورهم, they will have their reward and their light. والذين كفروا وكذبوا بآياتنا, and those who deny, or rather have kufr, and they reject our signs, our ayat, أولئك أصحاب الجحيم, they are the dwellers of the fire. All right. So let's start with رسله. والذين آمنوا بالله ورسله. Those who believe, have true iman in Allah and His messengers. So why is messengers? Why is it all messengers? Why is it plural? Not just the Prophet ﷺ? Because first of all, we are the only ummah that get the privilege to claim all of the prophets. SubhanAllah, have you ever thought about that? Like, we're the only ummah that we can claim all prophets. No other ummah can actually do this, because they would either miss one or two or three or many. They would miss a few. But us, we claim the Prophet ﷺ, who is the seal of the Prophet, the last of the prophets, and every other prophet that came before him. So all of them are ours. All of them. We believe in all of them. In fact, on the day of judgment, we will bear witness to the prophets as mentioned in the hadith. Like, we are the ones who will affirm Noah and say, yes, we heard about Noah. We heard about you, and you came to your people and you preached to them 950 years. We heard about you. We testify that you speak the truth. We testify that you delivered the message. Subhanallah. So we are the believers of all messengers. We get that honor and that privilege. Then let's look at the word shuhada. Shuhada has the meaning of both martyrs and witnesses. Witnesses, just like we will witness on the day of judgment, we are witnesses. But also, a shaheed is witnessed in a sense. Okay? So in other words, these are the people who not only accept the truth, but they affirm it so much so that they're willing and probably end up dying upon that truth. They affirm it so much. This is the meaning of martyr, dying as a shaheed. When you die as a shaheed, you believe in this truth, that you are willing to give everything up for the sake of this truth, right? So that's the idea of shuhada, dying as a martyr. A shaheed is technically a believer who dies upon the truth, but it also means to witness. Not only do they affirm the truth, but they will give anything and everything, including dying as a shaheed, to be witnesses to this truth. Do you understand? Like, when a witness is called in court, they come to be witnesses to a certain truth. Now, these people are called shuhada because they witness even death for the sake of this truth. They witnessed death. They went far and beyond any person can go for the sake of this truth. That's why they're called shuhada. So you have this dual meaning, this interplay between martyrs and witnesses, right? That's how much they believe in this truth and how much they're willing to defend it. This word actually comes from the meanings of being present and having value. The original meaning, the root meanings, is to be present and have value. So a witness is somebody who's present at a certain occasion. So they witness that event, they are present. And whatever they saw has value. That's why they're called in court as a witness, because what they're going to testify has value. When someone is affirming the truth, they are being present to something valuable, to something. There's no bigger value than the truth. This is it. And the shaheed never really dies, to be honest. I mean, we know this from the Quran. Allah tells us that you think they're dead, but hum عند ربهم يرزقون. They are with their Rabb, they're being nourished and they're being given rizq. So they're always present. That's the idea of a shaheed. They're always present. Even when they're dead, they're still present. And they're filled with value. Why? Because عند ربهم يرزقون. They're being given value. Subhanallah. So look at how both meanings of shaheed as a martyr and shaheed as a witness come to play here. لهم أجرهم ونورهم. They will have ajr and light. They will have their ajr and their light, more precisely. So they will be the ones who get their ajr, and they will be the ones to have their own light that would show them the path to this ajr. Remember the scene that we discussed on the Day of Judgment, the joy of the believers rushing forward with their lights, heading towards Jannah. This is a reminder, just like Allah is just like taking us back to that moment. Lahum ajruhum wa nuruhum. They will have their ajr, which is Jannah, and they will have their light that will lead them to this Jannah. SubhanAllah, we're going back to that amazing scene that we just discussed a couple of weeks ago. In other words, the people who believe in Allah and all the messengers are not only the continuous affirmers of this truth, humus siddiqun, they continuously affirm this truth and are witnesses to this truth, that they also die upon this truth, but also they're the ones who make it on the Day of Judgment, having a light that guides them towards their reward, which is Jannah. So you see how everything just comes together so beautifully, subhanallah. And again, how so sorry about that, guys. I lost power, but I'm gonna share again my screen and then we can continue. I don't know what the last thing I said was, or um, but let's see. So anyway, we were discussing the meanings of shuhada, and we just mentioned that, this beautiful scene on the Day of Judgment, and how these people are not only the continuous affirmers of the truth, they're continuously affirming the truth. هم الصديقون والشهداء, and they're not only witnessing the truth to the point that they get killed witnessing this truth, but also they're the ones who make it on the Day of Judgment, having a light and having this light that guides them to their reward, which is Jannah. SubhanAllah, and just how the beautiful speech of Allah, how it all comes together, and how it reminds you of certain sins that you've we've talked about in the past, and just how it all comes together. It's so beautiful. We think the Quran is so simple, but then when you start delving deep into it, you uncover things and you're like, SubhanAllah, how is this even possible? Anyway, so the light and reward. And we talked about this when we talked about the section of the Day of Judgment. The light emanates from their iman that they had on this earth. So on this earth, you're cultivating your iman and you're cultivating your spending and your good deeds. And these are the things that will give you light on the Day of Judgment. And then their reward is as a result of the deeds that they did on this earth. So again, you have your amal, what you do here on this earth will determine whether you have a light and a reward on the Day of Judgment, and each leading them to the other. So you have Iman leading them to good deeds. So if you have Iman, that would push you to do good deeds, just as the light. Remember, the light on the Day of Judgment is going to take you to your reward, is going to take you to your Jannah. So on this earth, Iman is taking you to good deeds, is pushing you towards good deeds. And on the Day of Judgment, the light, as a result of your Iman, is going to push you towards the Ajr. That is the day, that is Jannah. SubhanAllah, just how they all come together. It makes you realize that this world is just a mirror to the next. Like what you do here is manifested in the next in some way or some form. So you start to see how things in our realm are connected to the world of the unseen, right? How our actions here have grave consequences in the next. How my iman here would determine whether I have light on the Day of Judgment or I don't, whether I will have ajr or not. SubhanAllah, may Allah make us among those who have light and those who have ajrun kareem. Now, let's talk about those who disbelieved. Allah says, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. Those who disbelieved. Disbelieved in what? He doesn't say. It is not mentioned. Of course, the first maf'ul bihi has to be billahi. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا billahi. Those who disbelieved in Allah. That's what we expect. But once a person disbelieves in Allah, then they start to jump from one ideology to the other. Just like we talked about وَغَرَّتْكُمُ الْأَمَانِيِّ حَتَّى جَاءَ أَمْرُ اللَّهِ. Yeah. So you see a person he starts to have doubts, then becomes agnostic, then he becomes atheist, then now you have new atheism, then you have modern atheism, then you have, I don't know, individualism. You have so many ideologies, subhanAllah, all these isms. There's just too many to keep up. Because why? It's just wishful thinking. It's just from one wishful thinking to another, to another, to another, because you eliminated al-haq. You eliminated the truth. لذكر الله وما نزل من الحق. You removed al-haq from the equation, and now you're just jumping from this to this to this, and you're الذين كفروا بكل شيء now. It's as if you've disbelieved in everything, because when you reach a certain point or a certain ideology, you find a problem with it because it's not the truth, and then it makes you jump to another one, and then you discover some mistakes and faults in it, and it makes you jump to another one, and you keep jumping from one ideology to the next because you eliminated the truth. And you will never find the truth in anything else but with Allah. Subhanallah. وَغَرَّكُمُ الْأَمَانِي. Just a bunch of wishful thinking, because belief in Allah is the ultimate truth. Remember the ayah, مَا نَزَلَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ, right? So once you remove the truth, then all you're left with is just different variations of lies. One form of lie, and you can have like one ideology that has one truth but with 1,000 lies. Just like the Prophet ﷺ tells us that this Kuhan, these soothsayers, these magicians, whatever they are, and these people who use the jinn, they will take one truth and corrupt it with 1,000 lies. So there's one thing that appeals to you, but everything else is just lies and falsehood and corruption, right? So initially it might feel good, but then the more deep you enter into it, you're like, what is this? This doesn't sound good. This doesn't feel good. Then you jump to another because it's not fitri. It doesn't align with your fitra. Now, again, reminds us of the discussion we had on the Day of Judgment. You know, the two groups, one with light and one without light. The one with light have been mentioned above. They're the true believers and the affirmers of truth who bear witness to the truth and die upon that hill. Like basically, they are literally shuhada, you know, because they die upon that truth. But on the other hand, you have the other group without a light, the hypocrites. We had an explanation of this scene. They're the ones who disbelieved or rejected the ayah. الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَكَذَّبُوا. They're the ones who disbelieved and rejected the ayat. Guess what happens to them? The Jahannam that was behind them. Remember when we described that scene on the Day of Judgment? مِنْ قِبَلِهِمُ الْعَذَابِ. Behind them, the Jahannam was catching up to them. In front of them was a wall with a door. Behind them was Jahannam. That Jahannam is catching up to them. And so Allah says, أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ الْجَحِيمِ. They are the companions of the fire. Again, that just imagery coming to life again, and it reminds you how that previous section that we talked about, section number 3, is connected to this section number 4. So you see how it flows beautifully from one section to another. Then Allah gives another example, right? اعلموا أنما الحياة الدنيا لعب ولهو وزينة وتفاخر بينكم وتكاثر في الأموال والأولاد. Let me see. I don't know if we can be able to. I don't want to go. This ayah is deep. This ayah has a lot of juices in it. I don't know if I want to start this ayah because we won't be able to finish this section in a few minutes. So I'm gonna spare this next discussion from this particular ayah, this example, and we'll discuss this next time, how this example connects to the previous example that was mentioned, and what this example is all about, and we'll go into deep details about it, inshallah. Just paint the whole picture and see how everything flows so beautifully. It's just amazing, subhanallah. So we'll start next time from this particular ayah, and we'll discuss about that. And I'm gonna stop there. So I don't know if there's any questions or comments or anything that you'd like to share. If not, inshallah, we can meet next time for the discussion of this example. Or rather, next week we'll do the i'rab, sarf, and nahu, and then the week after that, inshallah, we'll go back to this explanation. I know it's taking quite a long time to do this surah, but I feel like I need to do the best that I can, as opposed to just doing like a basic type thing, just to be done with it. I feel like I need to do justice to it so that perhaps we can, even though we might not take 100% of it, but at least like if we take a good chunk of it, then it's going to be quality and not just quantity or rushing through things for the sake of doing that. All right, I'm gonna stop there. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I'll see you guys next week inshallah for the Nahu, for the Qawaid section of this surah.